Hey Procreate artists, it's almost Halloween, and today I wanted to show you how to create this spooky letter. This is a part of this month's Patreon tutorial where I show you how to create the whole piece from sketch to render. And before starting, I wanted to show you some results from our patrons. You can now get more than 28 tutorials plus 2 added each month, plus a bunch of Procreate brushes and other perks. So let's get started. So let's create a new artboard. We're gonna choose centimeters and we're gonna create a 20 times 25 centimeter artboard, and the DPI will be at minimum 300. I'm choosing 400 just so I can make this a little bit bigger if needed. So today I'm giving you these free brushes that you can get by signing up to our free community newsletter. And also I'm gonna give you a color palette and the sketch just in case you get lost. The link is in the description below. Now the first thing you have to do is go to Actions, Add Text. And here I'm gonna write the letter Y and select a typography that is a serif letter. Now I think I'm gonna choose the Chartier one, if I pronounce it well, I'm not sure. Now I'll get the bold version and I'll type the letter Y. Now let's put it somewhere around here. And remember that sometimes when you're doing illustrative lettering, it's okay to use an original font as a base. Now go back to your layers panel, bring the opacity down, and if you come here from YouTube, just create a new layer underneath the letter Y. And if you're here following the whole tutorial over at Patreon, just use one of the layers that you had before. I think we used one for the letter Y, so keep using that one. This is gonna be some kind of a mix in between a tree and some branches. I really don't know how to call it, but there's gonna be a bunch of branches and the trunk kind of like intertwined. So we can create this nice effect with lights and shadows. So the one that I've just drawn is the first one. And now I'm gonna continue doing more. If you're here from YouTube, you can find the final sketch in the description below as well, together with your freebies. And if you're following this over at Patreon, you will find it as well inside the resources of the post. I'm really doing this freehand right now and I don't know what's gonna happen, so I'm gonna leave you with a little bit of music and I'll see you in just a couple minutes when I finish this sketch. Now, since I'm getting here and I don't see much, I'm gonna just turn off the layers that I had before and continue with my branches. for me now, the most fun part here is to continue the branches so they actually are the serifs of the letter. So let's see how we can do it. Okay, almost done. Now I wanna do a branch that kind of goes crazy like this. So it goes in front of some of the some parts of the trunk and the branches, and some part goes behind, maybe somewhere around here. Now I used to do this in a lot of my character illustrations because it looks actually pretty cool, because then you get to do more shadow work after, and it looks very interesting. So even you could do, I think I'm gonna do a couple of them, but if you like it, you can even do more and go crazier. As long as these ones are kind of thin and they just go around the main trunk and the letter Y is still visible, right? So you don't want to do a lot of them because otherwise it's gonna be a mess. But let's see what happens. So now this part is gonna go in front, for example, and then this one right here is gonna be going to the back. And again here, I might go to the front again. This is how it looks the best, when it's front, back, front, back, front, back. So you can alternate that and it's gonna look interesting, especially when we render this after. So again, I'll leave you with a little bit of music. Let's finish these two last branches so we can continue. And you know what? I think I'll just leave it like this, because I think one branch going crazy is kind of enough. So now I'm gonna go to the layers panel, remove the letter Y since I don't need it anymore. And here I'm gonna start adding a little bit of shadows and also this wood texture that I'm not sure I'm gonna use in the final render. But if you wanna do a wood texture yourself, you can just add these lines that I'm gonna be drawing now. So I'll leave you with a little time lapse so we don't spend much time here. I'm gonna finish these lines and I'm gonna add some shadows just so I know where to add the shadows and lights later on. And now the shadows. So I'm thinking to add them around these parts of this trunk like this. pretty much everywhere the same, so we follow the same logic. And also, let's not forget that some of these branches are gonna be casting a shadow on the trunk, so we'll also have to keep that in mind. But I'll leave you with a little bit of music again, and I'll see you in just a second. Okay, so now we're done with the first part of the tutorial, and before starting with the second part, I forgot to record something, so here's a little improvised crappy video that I just done in 2 seconds. So go to your layers panel, change the background color into something dark. I would choose this purple and go darker now. Now select the sketch, go to adjustments, hue, saturation and brightness, bring the brightness up and make this bigger. Let's continue. Now remember that this tutorial is a part of the Patreon complete tutorial that I've done, so that's why you see a lot of elements around the letter Y. Now let's select this green on a new layer and the Urban Essence brush. And we're gonna start doing this first part. Remember to use a small size to go over this. Just like this, perfect. Now close the shape and drop a color inside. Now here you can go over it a bit more just to cover some imperfections. And we have the first shape done. Now go to the layers panel, create a new layer and bring it to the background. And now we'll do the same. Let's do this shape here. Now since this one is in the background, we don't have to worry that much about the bottom part of the shape, just about the rest. See, we can enter here. Let's fill it up. And here, let's close the gap here so we can drop a color. And again, go over it with a brush again to perfect those little gaps where the ink didn't go because of the brush's texture. Okay, so now we repeat the same steps. New layer, bring it to the background, and let's do the third part. Now for this one down, we don't need to add a new layer. So we're gonna be using this layer, so the second one we have, because it's not touching directly. And exactly the same for this one right here. But now we're running out of layers, so I'm gonna create a new layer and put it underneath everything else and create this last part. So let's continue with the parts. Now we can use this layer 4. Again, since it's not touching anything else. Let's fill it up. Let's continue now. We can use this one, for example. And now we're gonna create a new layer and again, bring it back to the background to do this next part. Okay, let's create a new layer again, bring it to the background, and let's do this big chunk here. Remember that if you don't cover the spaces well, you won't be able to drop a color inside the closed shape. So make sure that everything is closed. Let's do again, layer, background. Let's paint this little thing here. We're almost done with the main structure of this tree, if you can call it a tree. It's more like a bunch of roots or young branches. For sure there's a name for it, but anyway. Now, let's create a layer on top of everything else, and let's change this green into the lighter green. Now, we are gonna make this part right here. Remember that if you have a monoline, as I said during the sketching part, it's gonna be even easier. So you can select a monoline brush and just make this out of one stroke. But I'll do manually the parallel lines, so I keep that same outline texture that I'm having around my piece. So let's for now paint this little part, and then we're gonna take care of erasing what goes in the background and what not. Let's make it a little bit thicker here. Great, now let's get the eraser, the same brush that I'm using, but as an eraser. Now I'm gonna isolate this layer by tapping here for a second. And now trying to find the part of the tree that this layer has to go behind of. So I think it's this one. So I'm just gonna draw in here just so I know where this is going, and then I'm gonna erase right here. Let's continue this part. And now that I'm almost done with this, yeah, let's go to the layers panel again, and we create a layer on top of everything else. And now we paint this branch right here. Now let's go to our layers and let's show all the layers that we have. And now I'm missing a couple parts here, so I'm gonna see if let's select this layer, do this little part here, fill it up. And finally, well, I'm gonna actually drop my original green here. And finally, on the last layer, I'm gonna do the last part. Okay, done. So now I'm gonna go to my layers panel and add a new layer on top of each branch and make it a clipping mask. So new layer, tap, clipping mask. New layer, tap, clipping mask. So do that for every layer. And these clipping masks are gonna be the ones that will have our shadows and lights. Great, now go to the colors panel, select this dark green here and the dotty shader brush. Now let's start with the first layer we made. Let's go to its clipping mask and we're gonna start adding some shadows right here. I'm actually gonna turn off the sketch so I see what I'm doing better and just keep adding shadows so it looks consistent enough. And also now go into the middle a bit and as you go to the left side, please remember to use a lighter green just so we add some light on the left side. Okay, now I'm pretty much done with the main shadows and lights. So I'm gonna go here and I'm gonna erase this because I didn't do it before. So let's see which layer am I talking about. It's this one, so I'm gonna tap on it, select, and now go back to that layer that you want to erase the part of and just erase like this. Now I want to go back to this layer that I was shading before because I want to add a little bit more light and shadow. Remember that the first one we shade is the most important one because it's gonna determine how the other ones look as well. So let me just add some more green on the left side. Like this. So actually the shadow, there's a lot of shadow on the bottom right side and there's a little bit of shadow on the top left as well. And now here with this second light from, well actually with the lightest color you have on the color palette, I'm just gonna add some light here using the same brush but in a smaller size, like this. Yeah, I think this looks way better and we can actually use it for the rest of the composition. Now, I want to make a little rim light here. A rim light means a light that's on the edge of our object that is produced by an object that gives you lights, right? So for example, let's say that there is a moon on the right side of the composition, even though we don't see it. So that's gonna affect our illustration. Okay, so let's do one more together. So we're gonna paint this part. Remember that I'm using the clipping mask on top of this layer. I'm gonna add some shadows here the same way that we've done the same shape. Now I'm gonna make this smaller and add here, that's a cast shadow from the previous shape. And that's gonna determine that this is actually behind that first shape that we done before. And you see that this is already gaining some volume. Now there's another important shadow here. So it's gonna be the thin branch is actually casting a shadow as well on our object. So you'll have to have this in mind. If I cast it here, for example, it will look like the small branch is not directly touching with this second branch that we're doing, but it's actually a little bit far apart. Okay, so now you have the basics to create this effect. So I'll leave you with a little bit of music while I concentrate on creating the other parts, and I'll see you when I have all this done for the next steps. Now let me give you a little tip here, since we are facing something a little bit different. So we do the shadow like the same we did before. We make it now smaller because this is thinning out a little bit, and we don't mind that right part, right? So now with the eraser, let's select an eraser and we erase this part right here. From here till up here. Perfect. And now, with a smaller brush and a lot of patience, we start adding the shadows here on the thin branches. So remember, thin branches, smaller brushes. That's it. And another technique that I use all the time is the freehand selection tool. So you can go here, tap on the freehand selection tool. Remember to select freehand on the menu below and select just what you want to shape. Great, so we're done with the main shadows and lights. Let's do the little branches now. First, let's pick this color. Is the one to the left of the shadows that we were adding now. Since these branches are a little bit lighter, I didn't want to go with that much of a dark shadow. Again, same technique. I'm just gonna use a smaller brush because this is quite thin. And again, all these parts that go on the right side of the branch are gonna be with a bigger shadow. And as you reach the left side, there's gonna be a smaller shadow. Now here, for example, since this goes behind, we'll make sure that there is a bigger shadow here. And now here, again, right sides, remember, just a smaller shadow. Now you can see how good it looks because we before casted that shadow on the main trunk, right? So now we are starting to see the fruits of these volumes that we have been adding. Okay, so let's get to do the rest of these thin branches. Now, in order to add the lights, we need a very small dotty shader and this light color. So let's make it really small, like almost it becomes some kind of a liner here. You see? And we just add this line. We repeat the same stroke 5 or 6 times, and that's gonna give us the last little detail that we need on those branches. And now go finally do that little rim light that we had across our piece before. But this time really make it smaller. Don't make it everywhere, just in some of the parts that you think is convenient. So let's do it here, for example. Then let's go down here. Wrong layer. Then here it vanishes a bit and it continues here. and then here. Okay, we are done with the tree. So open the brushes, select this smoke brush, and then with a pink color, create a new layer underneath everything else and start adding some random smoke here. The more you press, the more it's gonna be visible. Just a little bit, just to add this mysterious background. Great, so now that we have this, let's start using another brush. I'm gonna select the grease right here. And now I'm gonna create a new layer. And with a black color, I'm gonna stamp it in the middle of the screen. Make it smaller and place it around here. Now I'm gonna isolate it for a second, like we did before, and select this right side of it and move it somewhere around here. Now tap here for a second to reveal everything again. Now select this part yet again and bring it somewhere around here. You can play around. And this is, I don't know, I named it grease, but it could be just like a spider net as well. So now let's create a new layer. I'm not gonna add the tombstones here since I'm adding it in the Patreon tutorial, which makes more sense. So I'm gonna get the spider net. And now the spider net, I'm gonna add it in between two parts of my letter. So make it smaller and remember to create a new layer and stamp it somewhere around here and let's rotate it. Now I'll place it up here. Remember to turn off the snapping tools, otherwise you won't be able to modify it well. Put it here. Yeah, I like this. So now what I'm gonna do to make it more real is to tap on the layer, make an alpha lock, go to select a black color. So I would say somewhere around, yeah, maybe this purple will do. And then I'll go with the soft shadow again. Remember, go to your airbrushing panel and select a soft shadow and just add a bit of shadow here and a little bit of a yellow right there. And that's it. This is how you use it and it's pretty easy. Now the last thing that I want to do is to create yet a new layer and I'm gonna add some flying bats. So let's create a new layer here. All of this is underneath our letter, right? So now let's put some bats here. If you have the barrel roll option with your Apple Pencil Pro, it's gonna look cool when you start using the option and you rotate your Apple Pencil. But if not, just stamp it and then you can move it around as well. Maybe some bats that are kind of like upside down I don't like, so I'm just gonna maybe place them somewhere here. Okay, now I like this, so go to adjustments, Gaussian blur, and add just like 2% of Gaussian blur since they are in the background. I'm gonna select this one and maybe even get rid of it. And now I just wanna add a couple last effects. So I'm gonna select the mouse brush. And now the only thing that I want is the letter that is visible, right? So unselect everything. Great, now go to actions, add copy canvas. Now turn on all the layers again. Go on top of everything else, 3 fingers down the screen and paste. Now create a new layer, make it a clipping mask and select the mouse brush with, let's see, we can play with colors, but maybe with this purple. And now here, we're just gonna stamp it randomly. Now, if you have the hover option in your Apple Pencil, you can see that when you change modes, you can actually see how is it gonna look before you actually add the effect, you see? That's pretty cool. I didn't know, so I discovered actually right now doing the tutorial. Now, I'm gonna stamp it here, let's say. Maybe we can make it smaller and stamp it in like several places like this, so the texture is a little bit smaller. Yeah, I like this. And now, again, just change modes until you're satisfied. I don't want this to be super visible, so probably I'll go with the hard light option and just like make it so there's an opacity from like 20 to 40%, that's on you. Now let me choose another mode. Let's see if there's something else that looks better. Yeah, vivid light looks good. Now go to adjustments, hue, saturation, and brightness, and you can play with the hue as well here, and you will see how your piece changes completely. So now I have this green. I'm gonna create a new layer on top of everything else, and with the soft shadow brush, remember that you have in your airbrushing panel, I'm gonna add some light like it's coming from the moon, and that's why we made the rim light before. Now go to actions, copy canvas, go on top of everything else, 3 fingers on the screen, and paste again. Now go to adjustments, and now here I'm gonna add a little bit of a chromatic aberration, and we are officially done. Hey, thank you so much for watching, and I really hope this was useful. Now, remember that if you want more, you can get premium tutorials on our Patreon, or keep watching more here on YouTube, like these two on the screen. Happy Halloween!